XRP is currently on a parabolic run, and a lot of you are probably wondering, am I too late? Where's XRP headed and where should you enter? I've been trading for about 7 years, and in this video, you're gonna get my brutally honest opinion regarding XRP. We're gonna take a look at different data ranging from technical analysis to on-chain data and social sentiment. So what we're looking at here is a daily time frame on XRP, and the first thing you might notice is that we recently made a new all-time high. So since early July, XRP has been on a massive rally, and a lot of people are wondering, am I too late to the party? Now, to answer that question, we have to look at the order flow, the trend of the market. Where is it actually headed? I use a very specific system when it comes to calculating the order flow of a market, and it's actually quite simple. What I do is I look at the highs and lows, and then I pay attention to the reaction. So as you might be able to tell right here, in April of 2025, we swept the low that was put in February. Now, we did not see any follow through below this low, and when I say follow through, I mean there was no significant displacement or volume happening below this low. That right there is a great sign, but of course that is nothing on its own. What we have to pay attention to now is the actual highs. What happened to XRP when it actually broke highs? Well, here in July, we recently made a new high, breaking the previous one that was made in May. Now, the clear difference between breaking a low and breaking a high for XRP is the fact that we are indeed seeing massive follow through when breaking highs. Again, when we compare this right here to the actual lows, we can see a clear difference. The market comes down, hits the low, and we get absolutely no volume. The market runs up, sweeps the high, and we do in fact get a bunch of volume. So that right there, based off of looking at highs and lows, will essentially tell you what the order flow of the current market actually is. Now, of course, it did not just sweep a singular low. No, here in early June, we ran down and then we swept the equal lows which the market had created right here. And did we see any follow through below that point? Absolutely not. We saw zero follow through, and shortly after we swept yet another low that proved no follow through. So it's clear that XRP has no follow through to the downside when sweeping lows, but it does indeed have massive follow through when actually sweeping highs. And that right there tells us that the order flow is indeed bullish. But before we get further into this video, let's break down exactly what XRP actually is. So right here on the Ripple website, it says XRP, the digital asset for real world utility. You see, the difference between XRP and a lot of other projects is that XRP actually fixes a real world problem. So throughout my entire career, whether that was stocks or crypto, whenever somebody has asked me what company or crypto should I invest in, my answer is and was always invest in companies that solves a problem that you face on a daily basis. Now, it doesn't mean you specifically, I mean people in general. A project or a company has to solve a problem. The whole purpose of XRP is essentially to move money across borders very, very fast. By using XRP for cross-border payments, financial institutions can bridge currencies and ensure payments are sent and received in local currency on either side of a transaction in as little as 3 seconds. So XRP is way faster when compared to things like Ethereum or Bitcoin. In most cases, Bitcoin transactions need 1 to 1.5 hours to complete. Now let's again compare that to XRP in as little as 3 seconds. So I mean, Bitcoin has a transaction speed of 1 to 1.5 hours, while XRP has one of 3 to 5 seconds. So it is just clear how much faster it actually is. Now, in case you're wondering what Ripple is the company behind XRP, and their whole job or purpose is to replace old banking systems such as Swift. Right now, sending money between countries is very slow and expensive. Now, of course, this depends, but let's see the examples here. Western Union fees can range from $20 to $35 for domestic transfers and $35 to $50 for international transfers. Now, let's take a look at the time. EEA transfers may take up to 4 working days. Outside of the EEA, potentially exceeding the 4 working days. General transfers, most international bank transfers can take between 1 and 5 business days. So it's clear that the current method is very slow and very, very expensive. And that right there is exactly where XRP comes into play, because banks can essentially use XRP to bridge this gap that we're obviously seeing almost instantly. So unlike Bitcoin, which people are now starting to use as a hedge against inflation, and it's basically looking to replace the physical gold and become this digital gold. XRP, on the other hand, is trying to become digital plumbing for the banking system. So the reason why XRP can become a very, very valuable asset is because it fixes a real world problem. It can essentially bridge a massive gap between banks and international transfers instantly. And right now, things are starting to look extremely bright. You see, a Binance article, Ripple whales massively buy XRP as bullish signal flashes again. According to on-chain data shared by analyst Ali Martinez, whales holding between 100 million and 1 billion XRP have bought a whopping 2.2 billion XRP in just the past 2 weeks. So let's take a look at Ollie's analysis. And as you can see right here, it is clear that whales have bought 2.2 billion XRP in the last 2 weeks alone. Now, why does this matter? Well, it matters because when whales are buying a certain asset, it means they are positioning themselves early. So if you've ever wondered, how do I find meme coins before they 100x? Or how do I find an altcoin before it 100x? Well, you pay attention to whale capital. You pay attention to institutional capital flow and whale activity. What we're seeing here is whales buying insane amounts of XRP, and these whales likely have insider information. So again, if you want to be early on an asset in crypto, the number one rule is to pay attention to institutional capital flow and whale activity. Not only that, but if we pay attention to the XRP Google Trends interest, well, then we can see that it is currently making a comeback. This means that people are opening up to XRP once again. Now, it is clear that XRP still has quite a way to go. The peak that we're seeing here on the Google Trends chart was actually the last time XRP was pumping massively in November of 2024. In November of 2024, XRP saw a massive rally of nearly 500%. Right now, the Google Trends chart is slowly climbing its way back up there, which means that we could probably anticipate the exact same thing to happen. Again, if we see the same wave of retail entering the market, it could push up the price of XRP massively. Now, most traders completely neglect macroeconomics, even though that is exactly what controls the market. You see, these traders will try and predict altcoin season based off of previous price action or some random picture that someone shared on Twitter, when in reality, you can break this down into a very simple manner using actual macroeconomics. You see, altcoin season is all about investor risk appetite. So right here, I've drawn out a risk curve. Now remember, I am in no shape or form a graphic designer, so bear with me. Hopefully you get the point. Lowest here on the risk level, we have gold, and right above that, we have the S&P 500. These are generally seen as very safe investments. There's really no downfall to investing in either of these assets. Now, what you might also notice is that the potential return on these things is also extremely low. Now, way further ahead of us, we have Bitcoin, which you can clearly see is a lot more risky when compared to the S&P 500 and gold. So what we can use this information for is quite simple. When the S&P 500 starts rallying, or the stock market in general, well, then that's a sign that investors are slowly getting back their confidence. What we're then going to wait for is for those same people to develop a risk appetite that's big enough in order to invest in Bitcoin. So once we start seeing Bitcoin rally, well, then that's a sign that people are getting their confidence back. Okay, the investor risk appetite is growing rapidly. Now, what comes after Bitcoin is the very risky assets, which again is going to be the altcoins like XRP. So not too long ago, we saw the S&P 500 hit an all-time high. That was then followed by Bitcoin hitting an all-time high. And so you guessed it, the next all-time high is again going to be assets like XRP. Now you might sit there and wonder, well, XRP has actually just hit a new all-time high. Yes, that is correct, but it is also very clear at the same time that altcoin season has not actually started yet. Now, why is that? Well, if we take a look at Ethereum, well, then we can clearly see that Ethereum is still on a massive rally. When altcoin season happens, well, then Ethereum will likely stagnate, okay? There won't be a lot of movement on Ethereum, because what happens when altcoin season takes off is that the money in Ethereum will then start to dribble down into all the altcoins. However, Ethereum is most definitely seen as a more risky asset when compared to Bitcoin, and so that again just shows that the risk appetite is continuously growing. And once that appetite is high enough, well, then that is exactly when we can anticipate assets like XRP to actually go parabolic. Now, another thing that not enough traders are paying attention to when it comes to predicting the altcoin season is actually the Bitcoin dominance. Now, a lot of traders don't even know what the Bitcoin dominance actually means, and it's quite simple. Whenever the Bitcoin dominance is going up, well, then that means that Bitcoin is in control. Vice versa, when the Bitcoin dominance is going down, well, then that means that altcoins are in control and not Bitcoin. So on the right side of my screen, you are seeing the altcoin season of 2021. On the left side, you are seeing the Bitcoin dominance as it stands today, and you might be able to see a comparison. You see the exact same trend line is currently forming as it did in 2021 that set off a massive altcoin season. So because it's happened once and we aren't magicians, we're traders, we can only anticipate that the exact same thing is going to happen. Now you might sit there and wonder, well, okay, if I'm not too late to XRP and all these other altcoins, where should I actually enter? That's a good question, and I'm going to give you the most simple technical analysis framework that I could possibly give you when it comes to investing. This is again the most simple framework, but it just works. So the first thing you want to do is identify a trending market. Now XRP right here is overall a fairly bullish asset. Yes, we do have drawdowns and pullbacks, but any asset will have that. XRP is overall quite bullish. Now, once you've established a trend, what you're going to do is use your Fibonacci extension tool. Then you're going to draw it from the low of the range and all the way up until the high of the range. What you're then going to do is buy below the 50% level, which we also call equilibrium. You see, this right here is not some new fancy concept. No, this has been taught on Wall Street for decades. If you haven't heard it before, this is what we call premium and discount, and that is exactly how any market moves. So it essentially moves from premium, which is anything above equilibrium, to discount, which is anything below equilibrium. So the ideal scenario for a trader is that you short in a premium and you long in a discount. Now, using that same analogy, you could have caught this massive pump that we've just seen on XRP by simply longing from a discount of this very range. So as you might be able to tell, this would have been your first entry and you could have caught some serious percentages on XRP with barely any drawdown. Now let's try this smaller range that we're seeing right here. We're going to draw it from this one all the way up until this high. And as you can see, the market dips into a discount and then immediately rallies all the way up until a premium. So again, if I were to enter XRP, I would do it near equilibrium or just inside of discount right here. Again, that has simply proven to work throughout history, and it is not the only market where this has proven to work. So do with this information as you will. I do in fact think that XRP has much further to go if the banks eventually open their eyes and realize that yes, XRP can actually bridge a gap that they're facing. Well, then that could obviously take XRP to another level. Overall speaking, XRP is a great project. The chart is looking healthy. They are fixing a real world problem, and that right there is the most important part. It's only a matter of time before people realize that yes, XRP is actually a valuable asset, and as it stands right now, I do think XRP is undervalued and it's going to go much higher. Thank you a lot for watching this video. I hope I helped you out. Now, if I did, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.